Bin Laden was explaining why there's so many Muslims in that region who hate the United States, but the United States government didn't want anyone to hear it. One of the reasons why was because we are so monomaniacally devoted to Israel.
Lots of Christians in Gaza, Muslims in Gaza. What's the justification for keeping that information from me, an American citizen? I have an absolute right to know all available information about that. China's an enemy. Our military technology is going to Israel, and then winding up in China?
I am a Riva, and I was taught how to pray Salah.
That means every single time I pray,
the person who told me gets the reward.
5 times a day, from Fajr to Isha.
If you want to support someone like me in learning Salah,
then sponsor 10 people for just £100.
Remember the Prophet, peace be upon him, said,
charity does not decrease wealth. Click the button and donate now.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. If you're watching this video and it's Salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. Please check out the description section of this video to support the channel. I came across a podcast featuring Glenn Greenwald being hosted by Tucker Carlson, where they spoke about some very taboo subjects. As you guys know, on my channel, if I cover certain individuals or interview someone, it doesn't mean that I personally endorse their views unless I explicitly say so, which brings me to the topic of Glenn and Tucker's conversation, where they discussed Osama Bin Laden, Israel and China, and how the US and Israeli governments are involved in repressing key information from the public regarding the truth of these matters. Let's watch the first clip.
Can we just talk 1 second about the fact that Bin Laden wrote a note to the American people explaining why al-Qaeda was driven to attack the United States. He listed very specific grievances with American foreign policy, all having to do with the fact that we constantly interfere in that region. We place military bases on sacred Saudi soil. We imposed a sanctions regime on Iraq for years that killed 500,000 Iraqi children that Madeleine Albright said was worth it. We overthrow their leaders and impose the ones that we want that then serve the interests of the United States and Israel. And we fund and arm Israel to repress and kill Palestinians. And he said that it's not that you're some country that's just sitting there peacefully and that never bothers us. And we decided, hey, look over there. They let their women wear bikinis, so we better go and attack them, right? Like we were attacked for our freedom. So he writes this letter. I remember the letter at the time. He was interviewed by Al Jazeera and previously by The New Yorker. So we got to hear from Osama Bin Laden. Although right after 9/11, the US government told media outlets, do not broadcast any speeches or interviews with Osama bin Laden. And their reasoning was, we're concerned that he may have embedded within his speech some sort of secret code that will activate sleeper cells inside the United States. Like he was going to blink Morse code or like have secret phrases and then people inside the United States would hear it. So they told ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, CNN, do not air any interviews with bin Laden, when of course it was because they didn't want Americans to hear from bin Laden why there was so much anti-American sentiment. It was because of our interference in the Middle East in general and our support for Israel in particular. They were selling this lie that it was because we're free and they hate our freedom. There are a lot of countries that are free. Like Brazil, women walk around in bikinis. They have elections. Al-Qaeda has never attacked Brazil or Japan or South Korea or Norway. And bin Laden was explaining why there's so many Muslims in that region who hate the United States, but the United States government didn't want anyone to hear it. 20 years later, while October 7th happened and we're supporting this ethnic cleansing, and I would call it now a genocide as well, in Gaza, that's what most genocidal experts, including Israelis and Jewish ones, call it. In the middle of all that, a bunch of young people who were told the history of 9/11 that the US government wanted everyone to believe, discovered the bin Laden letter because it was on the Guardian's website. Because the Guardian's a British newspaper. It was not no American news outlet, despite its historical importance. And they started passing it around on TikTok and saying, oh, wow, I never knew any of this. I never understood that one of the reasons why these people attacked us was because we are so monomaniacally devoted to Israel and why that we're constantly interfering in that region, bombing them, sanctions, overthrowing their government, overthrowing their leaders. Of course, people are going to get angry at us and want to attack back.
Once again, just to be clear, I'm not endorsing any group, whether that be bin Laden or the Israeli regime. I'm simply exploring the information presented. I was somewhat aware of the fact that bin Laden had written a letter to the American people explaining his grievances with their government, as Glenn highlighted, due to the online hype surrounding its rediscovery. However, I must admit I was not fully aware of the contents. Glenn claimed that bin Laden's grudge against the US had to do with the American military bases on Saudi soil, the killing of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, and due to the US funding Israel to kill and oppress Palestinians. Glenn also claimed that the US did all of this to serve Israel's interests. To back this up, there is video evidence of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu urging the US Congress to go to war against Iraq before 9/11 ever took place. Not to mention the rumours that Israel's Mossad staged 9/11 as a false flag attack, along with the CIA, to artificially create an excuse to invade Iraq. And if we add in yet more speculation about Bin Laden's ties to the CIA, the implication could be that they were all in on it together. But for now, let's stick with Glenn's line of thought. Glenn made a valid claim that the US has never been hated in the Middle East for their so-called freedom, as there's countless other countries that are liberal and secular in their culture that have never had any issues with Muslim nations. It is plausible that the US didn't allow their mainstream media machine to interview Bin Laden in order to keep the American public in the dark, as Glenn claimed. I mean, they do the same with Russian media in the modern era, with many outlets being banned in the West. Glenn Greenwald not only acknowledged that Israel committed a blatant genocide in Gaza over the last 2 years, he also cited Israel's misconduct as a reason why young people lost trust in historic US propaganda and started digging into what took place during 9/11 for themselves, which led to them discovering Bin Laden's letter. Let's watch the next clip.
And the minute that letter started to become well read by the American people who were, primarily younger, the US government went ballistic and demanded that TikTok ban it. The Guardian, a news outlet, immediately took the letter off their website so nobody could read it any longer. All those links that people were posting on TikTok to go read that letter would no longer work. And then TikTok, immediately under pressure from the US government, which was obviously already threatening to close TikTok and ban it from the United States anyway, started banning all the hashtags, Bin Laden letter. You could not anymore read or find. I mean, this is like the stuff we're taught that the Soviets did, right? Like hiding letters, hiding documents, erasing history. And I continue to be shocked by that event, that everybody thought that was fine. To take a letter that is of great historical importance,
yes,
explaining from his perspective why he did it. Like, you want to hear from your enemy, right? Like, you want to understand like what they're
I want all relevant information, and I'll decide.
Yeah. You don't want people deciding for you what you can and can't read.
Yeah.
They were petrified that young Americans were going to hear the reasons proffered, and they made that letter disappear.
Why would the Guardian, which is supposedly like this left-wing British publication, like why would they go along with that?
The Guardian is very, supportive of the Western establishment. The UK is aggressively supportive of Israel, always has been, funds it with arms, does a lot of reconnaissance flights over Gaza to feed the Israelis intelligence. And when that kind of pressure comes to bear, TikTok, a gigantic multi-billion-dollar corporation, The Guardian, one of the oldest newspapers in the West, they fold in a second. Like, they're no match for that kind of pressure. A pressure that said, we want that letter censored so Americans don't know about it, have never read it, don't hear from it, so they only hear from us. They banned the Bin Laden letter. There's so many mechanisms designed to prevent,
of course,
any honest conversation from being held about all sorts of policies that people in power want to keep immune from questioning or challenge. There was no pretext to it. It was explicit. Like, we can't have people reading this. If you stand up and say, no, I think people should be able to read that. And then they'll say like, oh, you're pro Al-Qaeda, you want terrorist propaganda to spread. And I'm like, no, I just think adults should have all information that they want to have available to them. And I don't think the government should be prohibiting certain information from being accessible.
I'm an American. I have an absolute right to know all available information about that. I don't understand what's the justification for keeping that information from me, an American citizen who faithfully pays his taxes and obeys the laws. And that's the whole point of living here, is I get to know what the truth is. I get to decide for myself what's true. I remember after 9/11, when I was like, all about attacking Islam, I knew nothing about Islam. I'm not Muslim, by the way. I don't work for Qatar.
Contrary to what a lot of people think, despite the paychecks from Qatar.
Not a secret shit. I worked at CNN at the time, and like we had all these endless experts, most of whom kind of worked for the CIA, come on and be like, Islam is bad. And I was like, sounds bad, whatever. I don't know if I ever met a Muslim, but he's like, you know what Islam means? Submission. And like let it hang in the air. Like that was self-evidently disgusting. And I was like, I kind of think submission to God is like the whole point of life, but I didn't say anything. I was like, I don't think I'm against that, actually. Anyone who submits to God, like, I'm just for that.
I think a lot of religions seek the same things. You get on your knees in a church, you
100%,
like in Islam, you like bow on the ground. Like,
that's exactly right.
The fact that the US government had that letter banned from TikTok and from British tabloid media sites does give some weight to Glenn's claims. As Glenn stated, the UK is just as complicit as the US when it comes to funding, arming and supporting Israel. And like Tucker said, American citizens have a right to be privy to that information. For me, this just further confirms that regular citizens cannot trust their governments, whether that be the UK, US, Saudi, UAE or Israel, etc., as the majority of them are corrupt and in cahoots. Tucker also acknowledged that that after 9/11, he too was brainwashed with prejudice against Islam, despite having limited contact with Muslims. However, after doing some research and hosting propagandists with ties to the CIA on his cable news show, he found their attempts to degrade Islam as having the opposite effect. The fact that Tucker recognises that Islam promoting submission to God is not only a positive thing, but the purpose of life, tells me he's a God-fearing man. And although I disagree with him theologically, I appreciate the respect both Tucker and Glenn showed to my faith. Let's roll the last clip.
American presidents have always said one of the worst threats to American national interests in the Middle East is the ongoing Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank.
Congressman Randy Fine, and he said this the other day, we nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender. That needs to be the same here in Gaza. There is something deeply wrong with this culture, and it needs to be defeated. So we're going to nuke Gaza because of its culture. We're going to kill everybody because we don't like the culture, which, by the way, lots of Christians in Gaza, Muslims in Gaza.
Just innocent people in Gaza of all kinds.
Well, of course, but like to say there's some like Gazan culture that's cohesive, it's like, what? But we're going to kill them all because we don't like their culture. First of all, it's evil, but how can you say something like that and not get expelled from Congress or the Republican? How can that person be a member of the Republican Party? I don't understand.
His entire political existence is centered around a foreign country, which is Israel, not the United States. He barely ever talks about the United States. The idea that because we use nuclear weapons against Japan, then we're supposed to now use it on a completely defenseless population of 2 million people, half of whom are children who have no army of any kind, can't even break out of Gaza, let alone threaten any other country in the world, is absolutely demented. Even though at the time the idea was we have to prevent all this from ever happening again, they want to replicate it eternally.
But I don't know that I can support a party with someone like Randy Fine.
Well, so let me.
I don't understand. Like, how could someone, Randy Fine? I mean, that's so disgusting.
It's demented. That is psychotic. Everything for him is Israel. Everything. He wants to have the American worker fund that foreign country, wants the American worker to pay for their military, give $4 billion automatically every year. Every time Israel wants to have a new war, we send them whatever they want, billions more. We feed them all these weapons paid for by the American taxpayer. We isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. We block every UN resolution that the entire world supports in order to tie ourselves to Israel. We lose our own standing, our own soft power, our own imagery in the world. We lose massive amounts of money. We have to subsidize society. We have to sacrifice our own interests to protect theirs. We have to put the lives of our service members in risk, have American citizens die in order to protect Israel in the wars that it starts with its neighbors. And there is no reconciling this, let alone what is now happening, which is the aggressive erosion of our free speech rights and core civil liberties guaranteed to us by the Constitution, not to protect our own government from criticism, but to protect this foreign country from criticism.
The Israeli government has had a close relationship with the Chinese Communist government for over 40 years. And there have been a lot of transfers of military technology from Israel to China, including transfers of American military technology to China. It's a fact. People lie about it, and it's not true. Well, it is true, actually. And I don't think that's widely known. I mean, the Chinese help operate the port of Haifa. So how is it that the main recipient of American support, both financial and moral and legal, and, all the things that we have done for our closest ally, how is it that that country is materially supporting our main global adversary, a country really described by the Trump administration as an enemy? Okay, that's their posture toward, China's an enemy. And our military technology is going to Israel, and then winding up in China? Transferring American military technology to China, if they're operating, at least in part, the port of Haifa, we're supporting you. You have to explain that right away, or else we're going to stop all aid.
Glenn correctly recognised that the main threat to US interests in the Middle East is Israel's constant attacks on Gaza and their building of illegal settlements in the West Bank. Tucker took shots at slimeball US politician Randy Fine for being one of the main instigators of not only backing the recent genocide in Gaza, but for calling for nuclear bombs to be used against innocent civilians. Randy Fine is a radical Zionist Jewish supremacist, and like Tucker said, for this evil man to call for the deaths of Muslims and Christians in Gaza because he doesn't like their culture makes it quite clear that he should not be working in a government position whatsoever. Glenn was also correct to call out Randy Fine as being an Israel first sellout that is using his political position to take advantage of the US to benefit the Zionist regime, as well as him being a demented psychopath for wanting to nuke 2 million people, half of whom are children. Glenn listed off how politicians like Randy Fine are complicit in US citizens being forced to pay to arm Israel and to improve the lifestyles of Israelis to the tune of billions and to the detriment of Americans. as well as American troops being sacrificed fighting Israel's wars, and American public's free speech being censored through laws that make it illegal for them to criticize Israel, which not only results in the US government being seen as a global villain, it has a knock-on effect in how Americans are viewed in general. Tucker also made a valid point when he said Israel as a supposed ally is violating the US by sharing US military technology and secrets with America's rival, China. The audacity of this is astonishing. The US pays to arm Israel for free, then Israel turns around and sells that technology to China for a profit, cashing in twice. I completely get why Tucker was enraged by this. Like he said, in an ideal world, America would cut off all funding to Israel for such a betrayal. However, since the US government is occupied and controlled by Zionists, Israel's corruption will continue with impunity. But credit to Glenn Greenwald and Tucker Carlson for bringing these facts to light on such a huge platform. Thank you for watching. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.